trading cards, the original loot box pay-to-win game system. Forget buying 50 loot boxes trying to get Witch Mercy, I'll gladly pay $499 to get a Shining Charizard in poor condition. The biggest advertising for these games in the early 2000s were children's anime. Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, Digimon, Duel Masters. The anime was just as important to selling the cards as the cards were for selling the show. However, many of these shows had to be adapted for an English audience. Luckily, one American company, 4Kids Entertainment, had a mission: take all foreign media and make it American. I don't mean translate it to English, I mean make it American. See a rice ball, call it a donut. See a cigarette, make it a lollipop. Hear the word kill or death, you're not going to die, you're just going to the Shadow Realm. So 4Kids was like, we're doing a good job, let's make our own show. Chaotic! Chaotic has a fascinating history to it. Originally, it was a Danish card game called Grolls and Gorks, produced in 2000 by Draco Heads Entertainment. Grolls and Gorks was eventually rebranded to Chaotic, Now or Never by Apex Marketing, where the game concept was further developed. Many of the characters who would become series stapled weren't introduced until this point, like Maxor, the series mascot. You gotta love Matador. Autocorrect. Enter 4Kids, who published a license from Apex to publish Chaotic internationally. Unlike the rest of their adaptations, 4Kids had a direct hand in the development of Chaotic from this point on. Working with the original creators, they added a bunch of new mechanics into the game, and a lot of the old characters were redesigned. Finally, 4Kids produced a show about Chaotic called Chaotic. The selling point for Chaotic was its fully functional online game. Every card in Chaotic had a unique code, which could be entered into the online game. The Chaotic codes are obnoxiously displayed on the card, and the back of the card has a website URL. It's less like a trading card game and more like a freelance graphic designer's business card. I mean, the website is on the back of every card. Talk about shameless self-promotion. It feels more as if the online game was the primary part of Chaotic, and the physical cards were just supplementary. The card stock isn't even that great. All of these cards I have are new old stock, taken right out of the package, and some of them have edge and foil damage. I never played Chaotic. I wasn't even interested in Chaotic. As a kid, I grouped it in with Duel Masters as sort of those D-grade card games, and I'm probably wrong. But after doing research for this video, I've discovered that Chaotic has an incredibly dedicated fan base. All 9 of them are like super into it. They are small, but mighty. So I'm gonna jump in and discover one of the most underappreciated and short-lived card game series multimedia project things ever. I'm gonna kind of treat my exposure to Chaotic as if I were a kid being introduced to it. So let's watch the show first. Chaotic, the show, explores the lore of the world of Param and the Battledrome. Tom, played by Jason Griffith, aka Sonic the Hedgehog from Sonic X,
previously on Chaotic,
is your regular teenage boy. He's handsome, decently popular, and actively plays trading card games in school. So complete fiction. He receives a special code which allows him to visit the real world of Chaotic. Chaotic is divided into 2 parts: the Battledrome, where players become the creatures of Chaotic and fight with some of the same rules in the game, and Param, the Narnia-esque mythical world where all the creatures live. To play with the creatures in the Battledrome, the cast must travel into Param to scan them with their digital device pocket dex thing. All the creatures are divided into 5 separate tribes, who all have these different attributes, strategic value, and relationships with one another. Each tribe has its leader. This is Muskox. He's sort of the leader of the overworld tribe and the pseudo-mascot for the series. Neat. The first season of the show was animated in Flash, and it definitely is charming in a way, but you can tell they just used the standard line and gradient tools built in Flash. Seasons 2 and 3 took on this more traditional anime aesthetic, but it's this very low frame rate. I would have rather seen more money go into this flat Flash animation look. Yes, it does look sloppy when animated, but that's just because of the nature of motion tween-based animation. But when paused, it doesn't look bad. It's visually unique, and I would have rather seen a traditional version of this rather than a low-end, generic anime aesthetic. The music in Chaotic is actually composed by some of the people who did the English score for Sonic X. This doesn't affect my opinion on the series, it just was very hard for me not to notice. Each episode I've watched was usually split into an A and B storyline, where one group goes off to scan a creature in Param, and somebody else is back home playing the game. Usually the strategy being used in the show is laid out in such a way where viewers can understand how to apply it into the card game. I was actually surprised by the show. It's not bad. I was expecting to be dreading having to watch every single episode, but it definitely has a charm to it. If you were to tell me a show produced by 4Kids wasn't bad, I wouldn't believe you. But the fact they made it from the ground up means there's no need to edit an existing story to fit what they deem appropriate. They can just create it from the ground up with their own standards in place. But what about the card game? What's a card game TV show without its card game? In Chaotic, the goal of the game is to defeat all 3, 6, or 10 of your opponent's creature cards. You can just play with however many creatures you want. At the beginning of the game, you lay your creatures in a diamond-shaped field, and you take turns initiating combat between 2 creatures until one of them dies. And then you rinse and repeat until a player loses all of their creatures. Within the game of Chaotic, there are 3 decks. Your creatures, which are laid out on the field, your locations, which are drawn at the beginning of each combat, determining who attacks first and creating certain stat changes, and attacks, which are drawn during every attack in a combat initiation. Attacks will often do base damage, but will do additional damage depending on attributes of your and your opponent's creatures. Each creature has 5 stat values, which can change during combat. And the playmat has a graph on the side which tracks how that changes throughout the battle. Here I am using ibuprofen tablets as a marker because these rules are giving me a headache. Also, I literally had nothing else to use. The unique thing about Chaotic is how the playmat acts as a physical board. You can only engage in combat with another creature if the cards are adjacent to one another, which makes card placement strategically important. Playing the Master game adds both Battle Gear and Music. Battle Gear is equipped to your creature face down at the beginning of the turn and is only revealed when your creature enters combat. Your opponent may be expecting one stat, and then boom, your Battle Gear gives you a different stat. Music, or Magic Music, on the other hand, can only be played on creatures with the right Music values. I played 2 games. The first was with 2 pre-constructed decks without using Mujin or Battle Gear. It was one of the most repetitive games I have ever played. However, in my second game, my friend and I actually created 2 decks from scratch and played with the master rules in place. It was more engaging for sure, but I feel like the whole attack until one of the creatures die things keeps the game a little repetitive. You can only have 3 attack cards in your hands at one time, and not all of them do damage, so it's back and forth until one of the creatures dies. Second time playing, we decided to only play with 3 creatures, but there's just so much time between when the game is strategic and when the game is repetitive. But I bet if you were to get more involved with the strategy of the game, it could remain interesting during combat, but at this base level of somebody who's not really into the meta game, it is very repetitive. Alright, here's something interesting. Chaotic Shadow Warriors for the Nintendo Wii. Oh look, it's Maximilian. You know, he's the mascot of Chaotic. Huh. In Shadow Warriors, you play as Tom. You go around shooting bugs and scanning creatures to play in chaotic battles. The world of Chaotic has that PS2 open world vibe, and I'm actually surprised by the game's graphical style. It's not horrible. Battling, on the other hand, is. It basically uses the Chaotic card game rules, but you have the option to defend or scan when your opponent attacks. After you scan that creature, you now have that creature in your party. This game was also on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox, but my local mom and pop game shop only had the Wii version, and let me tell you what, when you attack, you do this. When you defend, you do this. When you scan, you do this. I don't mind the motion controls so much, it's definitely just not what I was in the mood for. I'm sorry, Morty. I'm just not a fan. After about a half-dozen card sets or so and 3 seasons of the show, 4Kids Entertainment sued Apex Marketing for the full rights of Chaotic. The details of the original deal and the basis of the lawsuit is kind of hard to find, but 4Kids apparently lost the lawsuit. For the years the lawsuit was taking place, 4Kids was not permitted to make any more content related to Chaotic. And in 2012, 4Kids filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Eventually, 4Kids investors had to break up the company and reincorporate as the 4 Licensing Corporation, who once again filed for bankruptcy in 2016. With so much of Chaotic being developed under 4Kids, it's hard to know what parts of Chaotic are owned by 4 Licensing and what parts are owned by Apex Marketing. So much of the brand that was developed around Chaotic, which people grew to love, may still be owned by 4 Licensing. There are still tons of fans of this series. After announcing I was doing this YouTube video, YouTuber Negative Legend reached out to me to explain that there was still an aftermarket for collecting these cards. The Mordecai card goes up to $100 on eBay. There have also been rumors of a fan recreation of the online game and a return from the original creators. But unfortunately, the future of this series is only speculative. Chaotic came out at a time where TCGs were rampant. Through its unique tabletop card game, hybrid gameplay, its online game, and its unique art style, Chaotic was able to stand out in the TCG space and even innovate within it. It's a shame it has been overlooked as much as it has because it definitely deserves a larger fan base. I wish it had a larger fan base, because I sincerely doubt that I'm going to get any of my money back that I spent on these cards. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. If you want to make sure you stay up to date with me and when I'm posting and what I'm working on, be sure to follow me on both Instagram and Twitter. You can also support me on Patreon, where I do monthly exclusive videos. The next one I'm going to be doing is actually going to be my friend and I playing Chaotic, so be sure to check that out. Anyways, thank you for watching, have a good day, and I will see you next week.